Welcome, everyone, to the Australian Bitcoin podcast. I'm Justin, your host, and today I'm joined by Brisket to discuss his Bitcoin origin story. But before we start, a quick word from our sponsor. The Australian Bitcoin podcast is brought to you by hardblock.com.au, Australia's first and oldest Bitcoin-only exchange. Hardblock aims to help their users save in hard money and to become self-sovereign Bitcoiners. Hardblock has no added fees on deposit, buy, or sell transactions. So the prices are what you see, are what you get. Hardblock's Bitcoin withdrawal fees are also among the cheapest in Australia, including a very low 99 sat Bitcoin withdrawal cost when using their new auto send feature. Check out Hardblock today. All right, Brisket, how's it going?
Yeah, good mate.
That's good. Thanks for being here. It's good to have a chat.
Yeah, it's what's it been? 3 or 4 weeks? It feels like a while since we last spoke.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right, 3 or 4 weeks, but it does feel like a while. It was really good to be able to spend a bit more time, especially on that last night, catching up, because I had this fear of when going to the Bush Bash that because there's probably going to be a lot of things on and a lot of people there, some of the people that I wanted to spend a lot of time with, like yourself being one of those, I might not be able to. It might be one of those events where you leave and it's like, fuck, like I really didn't get to chat to the people that I wanted to, but we did. Like there's sort of fortuitous that final night especially, and I feel like much more part of the community now, whereas in the past, like I was a Bitcoiner, but I felt like very disconnected from the Australian community part of it. And I wasn't even sure if there was a strong Australian community. Like I heard about it, but you don't feel it. But once I was there just for a couple of days, it's like, yeah, this is it. This is the place. These are my people. Feels really good.
Yeah, to meet your people. It's a hard to explain experience. Finding your people. I think my first one was Yapoon, and I went in very apprehensive. I'd been warned about, trusting people and watch out for scammers. And I had my guard up and like you said, I walked away from it, thinking all these people I didn't talk to, I didn't spend any time with. I went to my safe place and I talked to the people I kind of got along with and didn't push my own boundaries and sort of talk to the people I really should have and made the most of the opportunity. I didn't find that with Beechworth. I'm pretty sure I talked to most people. There's a few people I should have spent more time with, but there's always another Bush Bash, Yeah, it was great to chat to you.
That's true. And I had that same reflection afterwards. And I sent a few messages as well saying, hey, look, we literally had a couple of words there. I really wish I spent a bit more time with you. Like, let's make a point of doing that in future. Or let's just, let's have a phone call or a chat at some point so we can touch base. I did try to get out of my comfort zone a lot because I'm the same as you, that I was there with Jeremy and Daniel from Adelaide. So I knew that there would be this natural tendency to just probably hang around them a lot of the time. So I just made sure there was at least a few points each day that I would just go up to a random group and be like, stand here on the outskirts. And eventually there's going to be something that I know to input. And all of a sudden I'm now in this conversation. And it just, once you do that and everyone's very accepting and welcoming, and because you've all got that assumed knowledge, you just cut straight through the small talk and get to the meaningful stuff you want to talk about. And once you have that a few times, it's very reinforcing to just be like, there's a random group over there, but definitely people that I know that are Bitcoiners, I'm just going to go have a chat and see how that turns out.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot more value in what you don't talk about than what you do sometimes. Like you don't spend the time talking about why Bitcoin, and how much is in your stack and just all the stupid crap you would tend to talk about with someone who doesn't quite get it. It's just straight to the real stuff, So what's your thoughts on this? How are you thinking this is going to pan out? And did you see that? Did you hear about that? It's fun. It's all valuable, really high quality signal. Every conversation.
Absolutely.
And every person you speak to, they have their own slant, but there's never, I don't know. I've never experienced weirdness with the guys at the bash. Like if there is any weirdness in the conversation, it's probably me bringing it to the conversation with my own fears or concerns. Like it's not them. It's just so many great experiences, and you just have those memories now. And it's like, well, wonder what's going to happen in Yapoon. Wonder what's going to happen if I ever make it down to Marundai. I hear their steak's good. I just can't get enough. I think my wife's going to get pissed at me. Every 3 months, jumping in the car and taking off for the weekend.
I'm pretty sure I was going to say, I'm pretty sure my fiance is coming to the next one. She had this thought a couple of days before, where she's like, "Oh, maybe I should come too. You guys are road tripping, so it's not going to be that much, more difficult to add a person. But we've got a cat, and need someone to look after the cat, and he stresses out when if my parents or someone else looks after him. So I was like, let's organize the next one a bit better. But when I came back, like completely hyped of all the things that I'd learned or talked about and people that I'd met, she's like, I've definitely got to come to the next one, wherever it is. So yeah, I think otherwise she'd be pretty frustrated every 3 months as well.
Yeah, I
and
think
just
that's
reflecting on, what I was saying there is just that most conferences seem like a bit of a waste of time that I've gone to in the past. I don't know if you'd call the Bush Bash a conference, but it's probably the most, common word I can link it back to. But even in Tim's, like Wiz's first introduction, like that 30 minutes of just what's been going on in Bitcoin for the last year or so since the last Bush Bash, that was great. Even that alone, I was like, this is getting me pumped. Like I'm in the right place. These are the right people. We're talking about the right things. I've already learned a few things, and I've reassured myself of a few things. It's very rare that would happen. Normally I'd go to conferences, I'd leave and think that took a lot of time, a lot of travel, a lot of money. I met some people and that's cool, I guess, but I'm not going to be doing anything differently in my workplace based on that conference. So it's amazing just going along to something and learning so much.
Yeah, you always pick up some value. I think for me the biggest value is the one-on-one conversations you have outside of the sessions. It's like putting in the work. You put the work in to get there, so you filter out the shitcoiners straight away, and then you put the work in during the day, and you sit through some interesting conversations, some interesting sessions, some hard to process stuff. So there's some tech stuff that you kind of have to work through mentally to get through it, and then afterwards you have some fun. Like it's like you put the work in, then you have some fun. You sow your seeds, and then you reap. Like there's something about that kind of just makes sense. And I think if you took that work out, it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't be, if you just went there for a weekend of drinking and eating and talking crap, it wouldn't have the same feel to it. It's the same as if you held in the capital city. I just don't think it would be the same thing. I think part of it is going remote, and everyone that's there, unless they just happen to live in Beechworth or Yeppoon, everyone there has put some effort in to get there. So they're real. Yeah,
I agree with that. It would be a wasted opportunity if we just went there, drank and socialized. Like that would be good, that would be fun, but I feel like you'd be missing out on some of that integral part, which is learning some of the technical stuff. And I mean, it wasn't always technical, was it? There was conceptual things there, philosophical, some very kind of like emotional sort of life journey stories that really help you kind of orient and like, what do I care about in life, and what am I be doing in like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years time. So there was a lot of just really meaningful stuff there, but it would be a wasted opportunity without a lot of those things, I reckon. And you're right. If we tried to replicate that in a capital city and said, let's make it bigger, let's get more people involved, you would just have, you'd have people showing up that are not into Bitcoin at all. They're into crypto shitcoins, or they have heard a little bit about Bitcoin that is going there for the spectacle, which is just, that would be the wrong vibe, I reckon.
And you don't know what's going to be discussed in the room. You don't know what topics is going to be covered. Or you don't really know exactly what they are. The title's there, but you go, oh, that sounds interesting. And then it's completely different when you turn up. I didn't expect to get so much out of Qatar's privacy talks. And a week later, I bought a Netgate 1100 router, and I'm setting up VPN tunnels and doing all this stuff that really, it's beyond me. I just wouldn't have found the incentive to go and do that. Till it was all laid out in front of me. It was like, okay, this guy knows his stuff. I don't trust him implicitly, but everything he's said makes sense. Let's give it a shot. It's a $400 router. Let's see what it can do. And it's a really cool router. The pfSense software itself, pfSense software, just really cool. Like it gives you control of your network, beyond what the standard routers do. They make them very easy to use, whereas pfSense gives you all the power. It's the Bitcoiner router software. I just wouldn't have done that unless I'd seen Catan talk about it. And now I know about his signal and his content, and he's got an awesome site and a whole heap of tutorials that I'll have to go into at some point. And I'd gone and bought my Pixel and flashed it with Calyx, but I hadn't actually gone that step of putting Safari wallet on there, and during the conference, I made some comment about, can you put a donation link on there, and so we can compensate you for your time and the value I presentation, the value I got from his guides. And in doing so, I found his link, and it was a bloody PayNym link. I didn't know anything about PayNyms. And I was like, okay, I got to download this Samourai wallet on my new Android phone, which I couldn't download before because I was an iOS guy. And I downloaded Samourai. I was like, wow, this is a really cool wallet too. It's not easy, but it's very, very powerful, and it's got all these powerful features. You can see UTXOs and stuff I really hadn't delved into because I thought I knew Bitcoin. I was a bit more. I developed a bit of an arrogance around Bitcoin. I thought I understood it, but really, I was deluding myself. I just kind of understood the investment side of it, but I hadn't looked into some of the elements of Bitcoin that had developed post me coming in. So that was really cool. And yeah, now I just know I need to learn a lot more about some of the stuff I don't know.
It's a great way to level up your security and privacy. I was already running CalyxOS on a Pixel, and I've got a second Pixel, which is just with Graphene OS, and that's not connected to any mobile networks or anything. But the CalyxOS one, which is meant to be my daily driver, yeah, it is definitely. But the daily driver, it really didn't work that well for me because I had it locked down way too much where it wasn't convenient anymore. And I was talking to Katan about it, like outside of one of his sessions, and he showed me the way that he's set up his. And it's like, oh, that's actually so much easier. And I have all the same levels of security essentially, but I can actually have things like GPS if I need it, when I do need it. And then I can turn it off when I don't. I can have Google Play services there as a framework when I need it for like push notifications, or I can turn it off when I don't. Whereas the original way they had it set up, like that stuff just wouldn't work ever. And I was like, wow, this is really secure. This is great. But if I need to go anywhere that I've never been before, I need to use like a static map and just kind of roughly find my way there, and then use like landmarks or locations, or call someone like, all right, I'm on this road. Where do I go next? So it was really good to upgrade my own security, but in a way that was very convenient. I haven't gone to the extent of a pfSense router yet, but I did set up various guest networks on my own router, as well as just hardened it in different ways. But once I've got a miner at home, I'll want to set up a VPN tunnel through my router, which means I'll be going a pfSense route as well, because I can't do that on my current one, not easily at least. So I'd rather go open source. And I'm glad to hear that you're getting into Samourai Wallet too and PayNyms, because really powerful software that will really push you down like the rabbit hole of like UTXOs. How does on-chain analysis work? How do you then, circumvent that or obfuscate what you're doing on chain better? And I think that's really useful stuff to know, especially as, the world becomes a bit more draconian.
Yeah, for sure. I think I haven't needed to spend my Bitcoin other than a bit of here and there with Lightning, but I think that need will evolve over time, and understanding where my UTXOs have come from and just going through it carefully, not carefully, but privately documenting where they came from as much as I can, and at least separating them out, so I'm not spending multiple UTXOs on a single transaction, not doing anything silly. And I think I've got to the point where it was like, just don't do anything. Don't do anything, and you won't screw up anything. And I've kind of put myself in this position where I've kind of let perfection get in the way of progress, and I think now is probably a good time to start slowly progressing some of that stuff I've just put in the background and gone, well, if I don't touch it, sitting in my cold wallet, it's pretty safe, but what else could I be doing? How could I be planning for the future? Because it's not going to be at 40K forever. It's going to be a lot more valuable. And securing some of those holes and doing things just a little bit smarter, I think now is a really good idea.
Definitely. Like everything on chain is permanent, and even Lightning, although we think of that being not on chain, all Lightning channels are just a 2 of 2 multi-sig UTXO sitting on chain somewhere. So it is still on chain, and that might not be a big risk now, but fast forward a year, 10 years, 30 years, I think that can be a more significant risk where we'll all look back and think like, wow, I should have taken my privacy on chain more seriously. Even for people that are taking it seriously now, I think there'll be some of those thoughts later. And you're right, that whole paralysis by analysis of like, okay, if I don't do anything, I won't fuck it up. But at the same time, it's like, you don't want to be doing it for the first time when it is like under some level of stress. It's like, I didn't ever restore and try to like from the backups, like to restore my wallets until I actually needed to. And then that was very stressful when I'm like, oh shit, like I've entered the wrong one, to have actually like written my seed words down incorrectly. And then like the second time you're like, oh no, I've got it. I just like, I put something in wrong the first time. I don't know what I did there. But you want to do it a few times before you get to the stressful moment. That way, when you're doing it, it's not a stressful moment. It's just like, I've done this 10 times before. This is super easy. But it's taking times like now, I think, to practice that.
Yeah, 100%.
So tell us a bit about your Bitcoin journey. Like how did you get introduced to it? Did you grok it immediately and then get involved? Or was it something that took you, multiple touch points to then eventually understand it and look more into it? Yeah, what was that like for you?
The way I am, I tend to kick things around a bit before I dive in, and then I put some skin in the game. So I came across Bitcoin 2017, mate mining it. I bought some stuff off the darker web, and then forgot all about it. 2019, I started my carnivore journey. So I started eating only meat, and I got right into Sean Baker and where he was going. So he'd been in carnivore, I think, a year or two then, and he had a podcast with Zach Bitters, and they brought Saifedean Amos and Goldstein on, and I think there was one line, like they went on for about an hour and explaining what it is and the halving cycles and stuff. And then he said something like, carnivore is the answer to fiat food and Bitcoin's the answer to fiat money. And it was kind of like, oh shit, yeah, this is fairly big. And, I was hit pretty hard in 2008 with the GFC. I was out of work for 6 months, 2 kids under 2, no income. And I eventually started looking at pulling my super out, because that was the only piece of capital I had was my superannuation. It was like, well, I'm, late 20s, I'm going to retire at some point. I better make sure I got some money in there, and the stock market's bullshit. What can I do with this? The gold and gold, the whole gold rabbit hole, it just became too hard. Like I just couldn't understand how I'd ever be able to get any value out of it afterwards. And, I'd have to store this heavy metal somewhere, and you can do it with superannuation. It's just a bit of a pain in the butt, because you have to do your audits each year and stuff like that. So that resonated really strongly with me. And that took me like another 12 months of umming and ahhing before, late 19, I put 5K into Bitcoin and went, cool, let's see what happens. And then, January, I got very excited about it, started researching on YouTube, found Alex Saunders and Ivan on Tech and all these great resources on YouTube, and started trading with leverage.
Nice.
Yeah, I was doing really well too until March. I remember that day. I was on an elevator in Sydney in a shopping centre, and watching the chart just smash through, and I had a really large leverage long, and my mobile signal was horrible, and my wife was trying to call the mobile, and I was trying to exit this long, very painful moment. I managed to exit it and save some of what I'd put in there, but yeah, it was a stressful time. I think after that I got trapped. It had gone down so much from where I'd bought it. I felt trapped. I was pissed off. I was pissed off at myself for being such an idiot, for putting so much money in there and just not really knowing what the hell I was investing in. Around then, I found Bitcoin Twitter. I found Twitter because I didn't understand what the hype around Twitter was. I found some strong signal and started listening to podcasts, and started realizing I didn't want to be without any Bitcoin. My whole investment thesis was to buy it before the halving, sell it at some point after the halving, and buy a big piece of property and go and farm cows. And then I think I was at that point where I realized that I ever want to be without any Bitcoin. I was like, well, shit, you better buy some so you can sell some later to buy your property, but you want your stash as well. And you know how it is, that the more you read, the more your conviction in Bitcoin gets, and you just can't stop. And I spent the whole on saving, not investing, just saving, just each once a month, basically, I'd sweep my account, put it into Bitcoin. So that's my mentality around Bitcoin, and my conviction has only increased over time. Yeah.
I think that's probably a similar journey to what a lot of people have, especially just in terms of that coming for the money, doing a bit of trading, especially leverage trading, realizing eventually, realizing that's actually just gambling. Like I don't have a system that's going to work. There's a reason that everyone keeps saying, 95% of traders are not successful. And I'm like, but I can be that 5% because I've been doing pretty well so far. And this system's, not failing me yet, until eventually it does. And there's either way, even if you are successful with it to some degree temporarily, there's a lot of sleepless nights. You got to be glued to your phone. And it's just stressful. Like, even when a trade starts to work in your favor, I would find that stressful, because it's like, okay, it's happening. My thesis is playing out. But now I'm thinking, should I just get out now? Should I take a bit of profit now? And invariably, whatever I did was always the opposite of what I should have done. Like, I would sell and then it would go up another 20%. I'm like, that's exactly what I thought was going to happen. Why'd I sell? Or the opposite, where I'm like, I'm just going to let it ride. And then all of a sudden it would dump and it would take out my stop loss. And it's like, this is getting worse and worse and worse. And similar to you is actually things like finding Bitcoin Twitter, because I was on Twitter, but it was a lot of shitcoining and a lot of trading and a lot of the signal of this is what Bitcoin's going to do next, a lot of charts and technical analysis, which I think is just kind of like horoscope for men for the most part, technical analysis. But then once I found some really good people on Bitcoin Twitter, like Matt Odell and Marty Bent especially, and then their podcast itself, that really made me realize exactly what you realized. I think it's not even about investing in Bitcoin. It's about saving in Bitcoin. And that's all you need to do. Keep it simple. Just put a bit in whenever you can and keep learning to build that conviction in it. And that pathway it's like a road to success, I think, for a lot of Bitcoiners. But I mean, I think some people are still in shitcoins and are still trading and doing leverage because they just haven't been burnt enough or haven't found the right signal yet.
I don't think it's going to disappear either. I think as society degenerates further, that need to gamble, that need to have a win that somehow saves you, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Weimar Republic, if you look back at all sorts of hyperinflationary events, this is exactly what people did, didn't they? They would get their money and they would say, well, I need to keep up with inflation, so I'm going to go to the casino, or I'll go to the what seems like a better casino, which is the trading, the stock market, and I'll take a punt. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But it becomes this culture. Everyone starts doing it. And I've been seeing that just in the last few years. Like, all of my friends who've never been interested in stocks or trading at all, they're all apparently expert traders now. Then they get into crypto trading too, and they've got technical analysis feeds and everything. And it's like, this is a strange thing. And it's just becoming this, prolific culture. But then when you look back at points in history, this is exactly what's happened.
It's hard as a Bitcoiner to turn that stuff off too, because it's what your friends are talking about. It's what everyone's talking about. And you have to sit there and kind of go, I'm going to engage with it. I'm not going to think about the potential opportunity of this gamble, because it's a gamble, because I've got Bitcoin. I don't need to think about that. Like, to me, Bitcoin is this certainty. The only uncertain part of it is the timing. When's this all going to happen? Or when's it going to have its next explosion to the top on the right of the chart? Like, it's going to happen at some point. Is it now or 12 months, 24 months? I don't know. Like, I don't need to think about that. And that was, as you're saying, one of the things that really struck me was how much of my mind and my consciousness that this trading crap was occupying. I'd set alerts, and I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and put a trade in, or close a trade, or whatever, not to get any really further advanced. Like, these thousands of trades, all I was doing was sending money to the exchange.
Likewise.
So Saylor said something about that, about focus, on his 4-hour talk with Lex. It was about cutting out the noise and focusing on your best bet, whatever that is. And for me, that's at the moment earning fiat and securing it in Bitcoin. I'd rather not be doing that. I'd rather be out in the fields with cows. But at the moment, that's my best bet for securing as many sats as I can before they get really blood expensive.
Yeah, true. And I think, being out in the field with the cows, that's part of your plan, right? That's going to be a long-term thing. And I'm pretty confident that'll happen. I think all Bitcoiners' plans, that take the approach that we're taking, which is, stay humble, stack sats, focus on other things in life that are important to you, and know that, your money is there. You don't need to spend as much time on it. You don't need to trade it. You don't need to leverage it. You don't need to do anything with it apart from just keep stacking it gradually. I think that, that plan will come to fruition.
Yeah, definitely. And that extending your time horizon, so lowering your time preference. I want the cows. How do I get the cows? I have to save. I have to sow the seed before I reap. So I have to put the effort in now, and I think of it as a sprint, but it's a really long freaking sprint. Like, you've got these four-year cycles where the Bitcoin gets really expensive. I've got to stack as many sats as I can right now, because I know in 12 months, 24 months, it's going to be really, really expensive. And each week I'm going to only be able to stack so much, or each month I'm only going to be able to stack so many. And I was lucky enough to come in at a very opportune time. My stack's in the green, not by as much as it could be if I'd known a lot more, but at least I'm not sitting in the red, because I know what it feels like to sit in the red for months. I know how much pain that has on an individual, and I kind of just think you have to keep that vision in mind of where you want to go in the next 3 to 4 years, or 5 years, 10 years. I'm coming to the end of my fiat career. I don't want to do this crap anymore. I resent having to put my time into someone else's problem and sort their problems out. I'd rather be looking after my own family, and to me that's resilience. I bought the house I'm on now, the land I'm on now, 10 years ago, when I was under my permaculture rabbit hole. Dreams of creating this fruit forest and living off the trees, and I found Carnivore eventually and threw out the whole plant scenario. Now I want more land. But yeah, I found so many rabbit holes over the last 10 to 15 years, and I think they're all kind of connected. And each rabbit hole you go down, you kind of pick up a little bit of value, and you take that to the next rabbit hole. So I still have a lot of permaculture thinking in mind. So that the whole premise of permaculture is, I guess, a closed system. So there's no waste. Everything's recycled or reused for value within the property. So when you have waste, you go, how can I use that? How can I structure this system a little bit more efficiently so that everything kind of works together and benefits? It's just like Bitcoin. It's like Bitcoin, but outside,
Yeah, I moved into a place, built a place with my fiance a few years back, and moved in there, and same kind of thing. We're like, okay, we've got more of a backyard now. We had no backyard at the place we were at before. We've sort of upgraded. We've got a bit more space. Let's plant a bunch of stuff, and that way we can be a bit more, self-sustaining. About a year into that, we got into Carnivore as well. It's like, what are we going to do with all these tomatoes and chilies and that kind of thing, which we love to eat? But, well, it's apparently all the nightshades. It's the ones that you're not meant to, the same kind of thing. But I think maybe this is what I kind of drew from what you're saying just there. Like, you can still take some of those concepts of permaculture, and you can then put them, if it is to focus on something like carnivore and raising cattle, like, you can still have those concepts, can't you? Even if it's like you're not growing as much of like a forest of fruit anymore, there might still be some fruit there, but taking the concepts of permaculture at least.
Yeah, so I kept all my perennial trees. I didn't go carnivore and chop all my fruit trees down. I've still got bananas. I've still got a whole heap of strange South American fruit trees, a lot of citrus. They don't take any effort. I don't need to do anything with them. They just produce fruit. It's useful. It has value to me. I looked at a lot of resilient plants. So in Queensland, a lot of the potatoes and onions and things you can grow down south, I can't grow up here. So I've got taro, I've got cassava and starchy vegetables, which are really just resiliency plants. They're calories that you can fall back on. It's kind of handy right now. Bananas, you can treat like a starch almost, rather than let them go to the sugary stage. You can fry them up in a bit of beef fat and make quite a nutritious meal. So you pull little golden nuggets out of each one. It's just terribly inefficient. Like, if you're doing any N=1 experiments, what I love about Bitcoin is the level of transparency and honesty among Bitcoiners. They'll point out the stuff ups. They'll point out what they don't know as well as what they do. And you can leverage some of these great minds and shortcut a lot of this stuff. I love how the really good ideas just permeate throughout the culture, and rise to the top. It's beautiful.
And so much of it's just logically consistent once you open your mind or your ears to it. Something I learned really early in my career was that it's a superpower to say, like, I don't know. But tell me about it, please, because otherwise you have this imposter syndrome where it feels like you're always meant to be the expert in the room, and there's a lot of things you're not. And just being able to say, like, I don't know that, or actually, here's my idea, but this could be wrong. And I think Jeff Booth puts it in his book something like, to be an entrepreneur or to be successful, you need to have firm opinions but held lightly. So you need to have the confidence to kind of move forward with it. But if you get this feedback from people that seem to have more evidence than you, or if you get feedback just from, your own actions that says, I might be on the wrong track here, I need to rethink this, then rethink it. Don't just, keep barreling ahead. I think Bitcoiners have that innately, that ability to look at all things in life and say, why am I doing these things? And these other people that I respect and seem to know a bit more about this, they're doing things completely differently. Like, can I take anything from that? And that whole, N=1 experiment, it's very reinforcing. Like Carnivore, to me, that was one of those things where it just, once I started trying it, and once I got further into it, I'm like, this is so much better for my body. I can tell. I didn't think anything was wrong before, but now I realize there were things that were wrong and maybe would be going wrong further as I get older in life. Safety puts it in a really funny way in a recent, I think it's kind of like a monologue where he talks a bit about carnivore, and he says, for literally thousands of years and hundreds of thousands of years, we've been eating meat and fat, and we've been relatively healthy and strong species. And then all of a sudden we introduce industrial waste into our diet, and we start getting metabolic disorders, diabetes, obesity, all the kind of things that tendril out from that. And of course, the fiat mind looks at that and says, it must be the meat. There's something wrong with the meat. He said, no, it's not. It's the industrial waste, which is the most simplest, obvious thing. But for some reason, we just want to keep barreling ahead because, I don't know, that's cheaper or it's marketed better to us. There's a lot of probably different reasons that it's maintained. But when you look at things at a very logical basis like that, and then try it for yourself and you see the results, like, it's hard to unsee that, I think. And Bitcoiners, they just have that mind where they're able to try things out. They're able to, see things that are logical, and even if it doesn't fit with the fiat mindset, give it a try anyway.
A lot of this stuff's hard to prove. Like you said, you get benefit from Carnivore. You feel it. Like you can feel the difference. You feel more vibrant, more alive, more in touch with some greater sense of energy that moves throughout the universe. And it sounds wishy-washy, but you can feel it. And when someone says to you, well, how did your health improve? You start scratching your head and you go, I can't remember what it was like to not value meat. And I'm not a carnivore anymore, but I can appreciate the journey people are going through. And to me, the whole carnivore thing was about learning what your body needs, what it comes to, learning that you don't need vegetables. Like, you don't need to have your 3 or 4 vegetables a day. I was a veggie maxi. I used to grow my own organic green herbs and kale and crap and juice them, and I had wheatgrass, and I spent maybe 5 or 6 years trying to fix my health or optimize my health through plants, and it was a distraction. It was a 5-year waste of productivity that I could be doing something else. To bypass that is just invaluable. Try the meat thing out first. Don't try the veggies out first. You've been doing veggies for your whole life. Why do the same thing? Just more of it. Try just maximizing your beef, because I can guarantee you're beef deficient. Just see if upping the beef makes a difference. You don't have to go the whole carnivore route.
That's a good point. Like, for a lot of people, just taking the whole 80-20 rule in mind, or even sometimes I think 70-30 is good enough, in the sense that, no one needs to go full carnivore to get the benefits from it, but just try to integrate it a bit more to that like 70-30 or 80-20 type rule. Because for me, it was hard to shake the indoctrination of needing vegetables. Because with carnivore, I was like, there's probably some benefit here. I've been into working out before, so I know I need a lot of protein. Maybe I do need a bit more fat as well. So cool, I'm going to eat more meat, but I'm going to keep eating the same amount of vegetables because I know that's good for me. Like, I know, in quotations, that's good for me. And then I started like, oh, wow, I'm getting up really early in the morning and I feel wide awake. And I actually don't need caffeine to kind of make me feel stimulated throughout the day anymore. And actually, I'm losing weight, but all my lifts are going up in the gym. That doesn't really happen that much. And that's just literally from eating more meat. After a few months, it made me think, well, why don't I just push this experiment out a bit more and say, I'm going to eat vegetables on just half the days now, and I'll see if that changes anything. Then after a couple of months, it was like, I feel like I'm kind of eking out a bit more performance sometimes with these things. Maybe I'm just going to drop vegetables entirely and see how it goes. And during that time, I was doing a lot of reading and learning about, okay, look, you get much more bioavailable micro and macronutrients from, and like vitamins and minerals and that sort of thing from meats. And they don't have a lot of anti-nutrients that vegetables have. And so the theory, the science behind it started making more sense and made it easier for me to say like, all right, I'm just going to cut out vegetables entirely and fruit entirely. And I'll just see how I go. And I'm going to set like 3 months. I'm going to do it for 3 months hard and see what it feels like. And during that time, things kept improving further. I think you have to do that. Like you got to experiment, because otherwise it's impossible to shake the indoctrination, I think.
So with the carnivore thing, I think there's two things at play. One is, as you said, the nutrient density of the beef. Like a cow's got 4 stomachs. It's a ruminant. It walks around eating, nutrient devoid grass, and so it just spends the day eating. Like it's not fast. It just sort of meanders around the paddock. If it didn't have humans, it probably wouldn't exist. Or it may have been hunted to death by humans.
Yeah.
It's accumulating nutrients, and eating its flesh is like cheat mode. You get to acquire all these easily digested nutrients. Your meat, so you eat meat, like to repair your body. So there's the nutritious side, and then you've got the anti-nutrition side of plants, because plants don't want to be eaten. Even modern vegetables, they wouldn't exist today if they didn't have those defenses that stopped animals eating them. So the phytates, the
lectins and the phytotoxins and all the
they're all defenses for the plant to stop animals eating them. I think that's another part of it. So if you increase your meat, you might feel some benefit from filling in your deficiencies. So you can kick away your vitamins and stuff like that. And then your autoimmune type stuff, if you're suffering from autoimmune, that's more likely to come from the plants causing you issues, whatever that part is. So cutting out your fibrous vegetables and potentially your wholemeal bread and husks of seeds tends to be a lot of anti-nutrients. So that might be your next step. Or maybe you do the no vegetables, but then how do you get nutrition if you're not getting it from vegetables? I think part of the reason I went carnivore was I was following this Ray Peat guy, which is where my hate for seed oils comes from, polyunsaturated fatty acids. And I got into the point where I was basically eating sugars and starch and a little bit of meat and a little bit of beef liver. And I kind of at some point went, holy crap, the only nutrients I'm getting is from the meat. And this carnivore thing started making a whole lot more sense. I'd cut out the polyunsaturated fatty acids, and I was getting my saturated fat from the beef, supplementing my nutrition with beef liver, which is, highly nutritious. And I'm still shoveling this sugar and starch in my face just for energy. I might as well just eat the fat from the beef. And it led me to Bitcoin, so it was a good thing to do.
It sounds like, because Seyfried probably would have been integral in that journey, knowing that he would be talking about both carnivore and Bitcoin, obviously, and putting it on that parallel basis. Were there any other, prominent speakers or writers that you came across in your journey that made it really solidify that Bitcoin is the thing?
I hit so many podcasts, so many influencers. Once I found Bitcoin Twitter, I just started refining my signal. I started getting these people coming onto my feed. I'm like, oh, let's look at his blog. Let's look at their stuff. For me, I don't know that no one I can really put my finger on. I found a lot of comfort listening to I can't remember his name off the top of my head. The Canadian that talks to the plebs occasionally.
Greg Foss.
No. Wears no shirt on his podcast.
It's not John Vallis or John K. Vallis. Is he Canadian?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
God, I
he's
didn't know he was
Canadian.
Canadian. I thought he was from the US for
Yeah,
some reason. But yeah, just the iconic not wearing a short shirt in the podcast.
sure.
Yeah, that's
I
definitely him.
got
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that sticks out in my mind as the person who got me to see that there's other people like me out there. Because at the time I was on Twitter and hearing it, I didn't have anyone following me, and I kind of felt lonely. I didn't know about Bitcoiners in real life. I hadn't met up with any plebs, and just to hear some of I don't know, the stuff they were going through that was totally not Bitcoin related. The changes that were happening in the individual themselves. I wasn't a good person to be. I wasn't really a good person before I found Bitcoin. I would look at my former self, and there was a lot about what I did and said that I'm proud of. I think that's fairly common among Bitcoiners, even though they don't tend to admit that. I kind of Izzy talks about Bitcoin being a mirror, that shines a light on yourself. It is, but for me, it's a framework. It's a way to live your life better. Bitcoin embodies truth or honesty above anything else. And responsibility. So you're responsible for your situation right now. Own it. Like, it's no one else's fault. It's not someone else's fault. It's yours. If you lie, prepare for the system to kick you out, because we don't like that shit. We want honest signal. We want truth. We don't want this noise. This noise is horrible. Get rid of the noise. I don't want you dead, but I don't want to hear from you either. So it's like this immune system. It kicks you out, and being alone as a human is death. Like, being kicked out of your tribe is death. I think that's what Bitcoin seems to really really teach me. It really taught me, and it's not something you can flick off. Like, I've still got behaviors that I don't like about myself. I still do things that are short, a high time preference that I don't like, and I'm slowly sort of working through those things. And I hope I don't get kicked out of the tribe. It's something I don't think I could take very well.
I think, like, putting it as a tribe, that's such I think, an accurate way to look at it, because we are humans, we're tribal creatures. Like, we need to be in with the community. We have it, like, I think, wired into us from a genetic perspective, where if we don't have a community, it feels like we'll be sleeping outside the cave. We're not getting the fair share of food. We're not getting the warmth. We're going to get eaten by the predators. And we can survive a lot longer individually now than we could, hundreds of thousands of years ago. But at the same time, our brain is still wired to get things like oxytocin, which is from connection with other people. It's what can make stress seem less stressful. It can what makes stress go from like a survival moment to a thriving moment when we're surrounded by people that are like our tribe. And I kind of feel the same to you as in the past. Like, there was always people in my life. I always had social groups and sporting groups, or relationships, etc. But I always felt like I was kind of faking it a bit in those relationships, because they weren't my people, and I had to kind of conform to some degree to not be like too much of a weirdo or something, or have strange views. As soon as I came across Bitcoiners, I'm like, this is definitely the tribe. Everyone's honest, genuine, but they are like unforgivingly honest and genuine too. Like, you can't bullshit. You need to have that same level, and you need to have, like, there's this thing called locus of control. And like, if we have an external locus of control, we put it all like, the world's against me and all this stuff happens because I'm unlucky or it's someone else's fault. And that's like, we end up playing the victim if we've got an external locus of control. And whereas Bitcoiners have a much stronger, I think, internal locus of control, where they say, well, I can change this. And that kind of sucks, because it means maybe I'm the reason it's got to this point. However, that gives me some ability to then get myself out of this too. So there's like, the Spider-Man quote, like, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think, seeing that mirror, gives you that thing of like, fuck, like, I am responsible for this. Like, I've gotten myself to this point. It's only me that can get out. And I can't keep digging. I need like a different tool here instead. But it's also very empowering, because it lets you know, like, well, this is me. I'm in the driver's seat, and I've got this tribe that, if I'm congruent with, this honesty and this genuine nature that everyone else has, they'll support me. They'll be there kind of behind me. It's a beautiful thing. And it's something that I've always wanted in life, but I've never felt that I've properly had, like, a community or a tribe to kind of be enmeshed with. One where I'm like, I completely agree with the values that this tribe has, even if we don't always agree on the minutiae of the detail. Like, I agree with the values that, the ethics that it has. And that's I mean, that's an amazing thing. I think even in the world, there's probably not a lot of people that have that, even if they think that they do, because a lot of the tribes are fiat tribes, which are based on some level of bullshit, really.
Yeah, totally.
I wanted to go back just like a couple of steps to something that you mentioned before, which is sort of like riffing off a conversation that we had external to the podcast about the Michael Saylor's advice to young people. And he had, there was a lot of things in his advice, but one of the main takeaways that I had was like to remain focused, like to know what your focus is and to, to filter out things that are going to distract you. And to me, that almost meant, to specialize, to find a field where you can make yourself, the expert. And you had like a bit of a different takeaway from that, and maybe even a bit of a tangent from that, which is maybe people should generalize a bit more. I was curious, like, did you want to kind of like expand on that a little? Because I agree with you, actually, when you put it the way that you did. I thought, yeah, that's true. Like,
so I agree. I agree that, focusing on shit coins or Bitcoin price, it's a waste of time. Like, you don't need to think about the investment side of Bitcoin. You buy it, you put it away, and it's there for you later on. Like, there's no thought required. But I think what's happening in the world on a global level, like we've been on this trend of globalization. Everything's globalized and specialized, and we don't make every component. We buy it just in time. We don't hold a lot of stock. So I think we've capped. I think we've peaked it in terms of globalization. I think now we're going back to localization. And whether we go all the way back or not, I don't know. But as a society, there's a shift happening. And I think the same happens in people's professions. So we've been specializing. We've had the division of labor for since the industrial age really heightening. I'm a specialist. I have many skills, but what I do right now, what's on my resume, it's very hard for me to break out of that. And that's cool. Like what I do, I do really well because I've spent my 10,000 hours doing that. I'm not doing a whole heap of stuff, but then I get bored. I look at where the world's going. You need to be able to fix your car. You need to be able to find food. If the supermarket runs out of food, where are you going to find your food? Like, we can't feed ourselves. We've outsourced everything to someone else. So just getting a little bit of generalization, I think, is useful if stuff does go the way I suspect it's going. I've been wanting resilience for 10 plus years. I didn't find it. I didn't find it with growing plants. So how do I cover that if I don't have 100 acres? I fill my freezer up with meat because I know I can live on beef for months. I've got tallow stored, so I worked out how to render tallow. I worked out how to, cook my food, cook meat. There's so much value within the Bitcoin community you can leverage and develop skills in, and it's low cost. If I stuff up my beef tallow render, what's going to happen? I've just wasted $20 for the beef, because you don't use good beef. I think developing a broad level of skills and knowledge in everything is very valuable right now. Yeah, if you're 20 and you're looking at what you need to do, look for something that we're always going to need. We're always going to need mechanics. We're always going to need builders and electricians, and no matter where we go, we're going to need those skills. I don't think going into a very, very specific field in an industry that may not exist in 10 years is the wisest thing to do. But yeah, get rid of distractions. Like, well, what's your 10-year outlook? Where are you trying to get to, and get really focused on that outcome? So I want to be on land away from normies. I don't mind having Bitcoiners around me, away from normies and their crazy shit, looking after my cows and being able to feed my family and myself. That's my North Star, where I want to get to, the outcome I'm trying to reach. How I get there, Bitcoin. I don't know much more than that, but I know having that one focus, that's where I'm going. How I get there will fall into place. I know that now, within my gut, my heart. I don't need to work out every nth degree on where that happens.
And you're right, being able to. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a bit of a mixture, isn't it? Like, you need to have a focus to know where you're heading, but maybe it's more like having a compass, so you know the direction that you're going, but you don't always know like the exact destination that you're going to end up. Because at least you're heading the right direction with a compass, if that metaphor makes sense. Because there is something to Yeah, you're right. There's a very cyclical nature of things where if we've gone down this route of globalization, specialization, like offshoring things, there is going to come a time, and we're already seeing that now, where that's going to come back. We're going to localize it more. More jack of all trades are going to be required. And I think I'm kind of primed for that too, because even though I have had a few times of finding what feels like a specialty in life, that's only ever lasted a few years. And then I've picked up something else and I've gone, wow, this other thing's really cool too. I'm going to just integrate them both. I'm not going to like drop one entirely. I'm going to try to like keep them both running. And every few years I do that. Like I add another thing in there where I'm like, this is a useful skill. Some of it's related, some of it's completely tangential, but I'll put this all together and I become a better person from it. And it gives me more motivation as well, having that kind of variety. And I think it makes us less complacent because we're constantly viewing new things from new perspectives, new people, new networks. And so it keeps our brain kind of fresh. One of the things I heard when I was first studying psychology, a lecturer, he had 3 different master's degrees, one in forensic psychology, one in organizational psychology, one in clinical psychology. And he was a lecturer. He was doing an ethics lecture. And he said every 3 or 4 years, he changes his industry. So he'll go and just do like forensic assessments in prisons for 3 or 4 years, which is just literally doing an assessment, writing a report, sending it off. That's it. No therapy stuff. Then after 3 or 4 years, he'd go into therapy work, one-on-one, individual, all the conceptualization, having people there for years. And after a few years, he'd then move into organizational psychology, not working with people at all, working more at that, that organizational level. And he said he did that because it kept him fresh. Every time he'd then rotate back to one of the other industries, things had changed. The culture was a bit different. There'd be new networks to form, and it kind of kept his mind fresh. And I thought, I don't want 3 master's degrees. That sounds insane. But I can see a benefit to doing that, to not stagnating and not just staying in the same thing. And I know that definitely works for me personally too, because after a few years, I do start to get a bit itchy, like, all right, I need something more here. I need something different. I need some variety. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Like having a focus, having a direction, but not being scared about learning new skills or going on tangents sometimes, especially if you can see that's going to be still pushing you towards that direction that you want to head.
I think as humans, we have that, is it Dunbar's number, where you have a certain number of people or a certain number of connections you can maintain intellectually. We have that constraint. Like, I think it's more about quality. We don't have a lot of quality connections right now in the modern day. Like, that's what's really cool about Bitcoin, is you have these really strong connections, like your brothers and your sisters. You feel things you haven't felt potentially for a long time. As like that contrast. It's like, I want more of that. I've never felt that. What's this thing? Like, why am I connecting with these people more deeply? I want more of that. And I think I always struggled to figure out what I want in life. Like, what's my bigger picture? What's my North Star? And I found it really helpful to focus on what I didn't want. So I don't want to be trapped. I don't want to be relying on someone else, relying on a medical system, relying on a food production system, or relying on, I want freedom. I want control. They're things that are valuable to me. So now I can move my goals more along those lines and towards that kind of direction, as you said, a compass or a North Star or something to focus on. But that contrast is really, really valuable. It's something I really hate about this. What is it about that I really hate? It's that feeling. That feeling just makes me feel awful. So what's the opposite of that? It's that. So now I know where to go to. I want control in my life. I don't want to feel like I don't have any control. And the last couple of years have not been that feeling. And part of the struggle I go through is the urgency I feel internally to do something to increase the amount of freedom and control I have over my life. And every day I have to temper that desire to seek that right now and go, you're playing a long game, mate. Like, it might take 5 or 6 years, 8 years, 10 years to get there, but you'll get there if you stay the course. Yeah. Interesting.
Sometimes you need that process of elimination sometimes, don't you? To like try things out and go, well, I don't want to do that. Why don't I want to do that? Is it the feeling? Is there something else in it? And yeah, what's the opposite of that? I don't know what to do next. So I'm just going to go to the extreme alternative and see how that feels. And if that feels better, then in continuing on that path. Yeah, Bitcoin, I think, just makes it easier to make those decisions once you get further and further into it. And also to realize that a lot of it is coming back to, I think, like freedom and autonomy, because that's what Bitcoin provides as a savings vehicle. as a mirror into all these other aspects of life where you can kind of see bullshit and call that out and then try to be more genuine. All of those things, I think, lead to more autonomy, more freedom, having less others to control over us. Like I've changed careers. The framework, exactly.
The framework on which to filter through all the noise and the signal, and then what do you do with that? Like, I have this framework now, you know, it's quite clear, quite simple, you know, it's from first principles, you know. Are you being honest? Are you being true to your values? You know, if you are, then keep going, man. Like, because you're in the right. You have a right to value something. You have a right to preferences. You have a right to action, as long as you're not impeding
you're not infringing on someone else. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. So it gives you that strong base. I'm okay to feel this way. I'm okay to do this action or perform this action. I'm righteous, so you can fuck off. And I don't feel that with any anger. It's just I'm just exercising my God-given right, my fundamental human rights.
First principles is literally what I had in mind when you mentioned that, and it's just such a good base to come back to, isn't it? And it's the opposite of the slippery slope dilemma, you know, having first principles, because you can see it, you can call out bullshit. It's like if someone said, oh, maybe we need a little bit of money printing. Maybe we need like a little bit of control over the money. You can immediately say like, no, fuck off. That's not going to work. And there's no point like, you're being too strict or you're being too extreme. We need to find some level of, compromise here. It's like, no, because we know that doesn't work. Like at a first principles basis, we know once someone controls the money, where it's going to go. Same as things like free speech. Some people say, well, like, some things should be censored. Surely. It's like, yeah, but where does that end? Who gets to decide on that? What if the culture's different in 10 years' time and things start to get censored that we had no intention of? Like, if we believe in free speech, it should be free speech. There should be no censorship. Same as things like, autonomy over your body. It's one of those things where it's like, that's been really pushed in the last couple of years. Well, I guess what's been pushed is that we don't have autonomy over our body. But if you take that first principles approach, it becomes a no-brainer to just say like, well, no, I'm not doing that. You can do what you want, but I'm not doing that. and sure, if that's going to make my life more...
I have these natural rights. And the first one is, my body is my property. So
that's right.
Whatever you think you can do with my property, no, it's not valid, because my property, my body is my right. And when your logic, when your decisions are only 3 or 4 steps removed from a first principle, then you have a lot of confidence, and you can quickly go back to that first principle and argue your point very clearly and succinctly, and it's right. And you have these arguments and you keep winning, and that gives you more confidence, and you become more confident in what you're doing is the right thing. And in the fiat world, everything's so complex, and it's based on these assumptions and conclusions that you don't know where they came from. Like, vegetables are great. Like based on what? What evidence? Where's the evidence? Like, it doesn't even make logical sense when you really think about it, but everyone's just accepted it, and that's become the norm. And so we'll all just go along with it and trust the wisdom. Like, I'm a logical dude, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners tend to be that way inclined. They don't tend to trust, and they apply logic, and if it doesn't make sense, they don't like it. That's not a bad way to live.
No, it takes so much of the thought power out of things, as long as you've done the thinking to begin with. I mean, when someone proposes you with like, will you do this thing to your body that you don't want to do, but I think that you should do? It's like, well, that's just, the answer is no. It doesn't matter what the outcome is going to be or the repercussions. Same as like, who should control the money? Well, no one should control the money. We know that we've done that experiment. Property rights come from ourselves first and extend out. You wouldn't then give away your personal, as in your bodily autonomy, because then you really have no rights beyond that as well. Yeah, Bitcoiners have in some ways like a simplistic view of the world because we understand the complexity. A lot of it is bullshit, and we can bring it back to some simple principles. Whereas most in the fiat world, I think, are very confused by how complex it all seems. And so they sort of wave it away like, I don't really need to be able to explain that or understand it because it's complicated and other people can kind of do that somewhere, surely, and then it'll be okay. Like I have conversations even sometimes about things like inflation or the money supply. And I have friends, some of them have studied economics and accounting, that will say like, it's far more complicated than what you make it out to be. It's like, well, it's supply and demand of the money, which means that if the demand stays the same and the supply increases, it's actually going to be worth less over time. Like, this has been proven throughout history every time we've done this experiment. They're like, no. it's a bit more complicated than that. It's not just about printing money. Like, yeah, no, I get it. I know, I get it. The government issues bonds and no one buys it. So the central bank steps in, they expand their balance sheet and they buy the bonds. And that's when the government gets the money to spend. Like, I understand it's a bit more complicated. However, it's actually very simple too. They're expanding the money's theory supply, which means the money's going to be worth less. And like, no, there's layers to it. Like, yeah, I get there's fucking layers to it. Layers of obfuscation or complexity, whether by design or not. It's what makes people go like, I don't have time to think about that. That's what all the economists in the world will think about. So I can just leave it. I think Bitcoiners see that.
People's minds are like a piece of software that's evolved over time, and everyone's added their little bit of code, and it becomes so bloated and inefficient. And then you get Bitcoin as this great filter or framework to look at things and to base your knowledge and decision making on. Suddenly you rewrite all the code and it's like, well, it's not that big, it's not that complex. And suddenly it runs a whole heap more efficiently. So when you put your mind to a task, it's like, bang, the answer's there, rather than this huge meandering process that takes forever and gets the wrong answer. You're bang on the money, and they're still trying to figure out how you got the answer. Like, I've got this cheat code. It's called Bitcoin. It helps me think better. Like,
yeah,
it's beautiful, and you become more valuable in this horrible system that you don't like. You know, people listen to you and they ask for your advice and they ask for your thoughts, and you become more busy and your attention's diverted away from the things you really want to think about, and you resent your fiat role. And I know you've made the leap. You've left that world, but you can dream.
Look, and I feel like Bitcoiners are all just heading that direction, and it's just, it's a matter of time. Some things forced my hand in the last couple of years. I was going there anyway, but it's just a matter of, I had the right sort of life circumstances that just really made it easy to take the jump. I think everyone's going to get there in Bitcoin. It's hard not to be in Bitcoin for long enough and then not want to be working on it too. And look, even conversations like this, interactions on Bitcoin Twitter, I think like everyone is memeing this into reality. Everyone's there as the immune system for Bitcoin, as the filter. So I think we're all part of this, part of the same tribe, pushing the same thing.
Oh, we're all working for Bitcoin. Some of us get paid.
Yes, that's right. That's probably a better way to look at it. Something you said there about the complexity and coding and how we've just like continually patched things over the course of time, which is why it's gotten so complicated. There was an interview, I say recently, I think it was like 6 months ago, with Ben Edgington, who's one of the lead developers on Ethereum. And he was saying the reason that proof of stake is so difficult to implement is because of the complexity. And he gave this example that just sort of blew my mind in terms of how bad it is. He was saying, so with proof of work, most of those protocols you can have within about 100 lines of code. He was saying their current client for Ethereum is over 100,000 lines of code. And they still haven't obviously figured it out. It hasn't been rolled out yet. So when you look at the difference, that's like 100 times the difference in terms of, it's just like the complexity is there. And then like the amount of things that can break, the amount of things you need to be mindful in future when you're just like adding more band-aids and more patches to it. And that proof of stake versus proof of work is just a great summation of probably what's going on in a lot of people's lives, like the complexity and the sort of the mental structures they've had to form, the gymnastics they've had to do internally to make sense of things and be like, this is fine, I'll keep doing this is a good life. Whereas you got Bitcoiners going like that. Sorry, you go. Yeah,
their processes are overloaded. They're running hard. They can't process all the information. And the hardest problem or error in code to find is a logic error. Like, the code compiles, it runs, it seems to appear, and then something weird happens, and you're like, why is this weird thing happening? And with money, that weird thing could be very expensive. It's not a small thing to have your money fail or have a logic error in your money. Like, that is huge, especially if it's running code. Like, it's running right now. What if Bitcoin had a logic error now? Fuck, the whole thing is under threat. Like, how can we patch it before it gets really
kind of like dire or catastrophic?
Yeah.
I was going to say, what are people in your life, because you, with the job that you do, you would probably still be integrated a lot with a lot of normies, and look, I am too, even though they've sort of transitioned away from it. And so I'm always curious, if they know that you're into Bitcoin, what do they think of it? What's their reaction to you?
They kind of just ignore me now, and I've kind of withdrawn a lot from. I used to be involved with everything. Like, I used to have my finger in everything and like to contribute to everything. Now I just do my little thing. I add value where I can. If someone engages me, I answer the question, I solve their problem, and then go back to my own shit. Like, I don't engage in their problems so much. Funnily enough, the financial problems aren't coming. They're when I was first getting into Bitcoin, which is ironic because I can explain Bitcoin a lot better now. They know my stance, they accept it, and occasionally I make a Bitcoin joke and they roll their eyes and ignore me. Like, I'm still waiting. Like a couple of people have come to ask me questions, and that's my approach now. I don't ram it down people's throats. If there's an opportunity to drop a Bitcoin fixes this, then I will. But I'm not selling it anymore actively. People know my position and know I'm into it. They know it's a big thing for me, but I don't try and sell it so much. It doesn't work. Like you can't give people a solution. They don't know the problem. And most people don't know they have a problem. They don't know that it's the money causing these problems. So yeah, if the problems are raised, then I'll bring it up. But it seems to me people are changing. They're not. Everything's remote now. They don't share as much of the small talk they used to do. There's a lot of virtue signaling, a lot of painting their life as being amazing. No one talks about the problems anymore. So it's really a weird dynamic. And I'm not allowed in the office anymore because I haven't been jabbed, and we don't get to see each other face to face anymore. So we just have these online chats, and everyone's very polite, and no one talks about anything of any value, which is fine. I don't want to mentally consume myself with that stuff as much anymore. And I think a lot of people are starting to withdraw from their careers. They're backing off. They're doing half-assed job. They're only putting in a little bit here and there. And yeah, my half-assed job tends to be fairly substantial. When they half-ass something, it's like, wow, dude, what the hell's this? You know, did you even try? I don't know. Yeah, strange times.
Absolutely. And I share similar experiences to you where I've got less and less involvement with kind of normie friends and colleagues from the past. And when I do, it's very superficial, the conversations. And that's kind of okay, because I don't really want to spend much more, mental capacity on it. And most of those conversations would usually be frustrating if they were trying to get into the deep and meaningful, because there's just it's too many.
Where do you start?
Yeah, where do you start? Exactly. And I think very similar to you and a lot of people that I'm talking to, Bitcoiners, that are saying the same thing in terms of like, I don't bother selling it anymore, and I don't even really bring it up. Every once in a while, if there's something I can sort of slip in, just like, off the cuff, I'll do that. But I wait for people to come to me. And if someone comes and says, I've got a question, or I saw this thing, is this what Bitcoin's about? Like, sure, you engage with that person. If you've got people that you bond with Bitcoin over, then sure, you have those conversations with them. But I don't bother bringing it up with normies anymore. And even when they ask things like, oh, how, you transitioned to this, how's that going? I'd say, oh yeah, it's going really well, actually. But I won't give more detail than that unless they ask for it, because it just feels fruitless.
You're still doing that Bitcoin thing? Yeah, I'm still doing it. It's been a couple of years now.
Exactly. I think we've all come to that. It's almost, again, I guess having a tribe, having a community, that makes sense because culture is very much, it's like transmitted through our communication. And I get the impression that a lot of Bitcoiners have reached that stage in the last year or so, where it's like, I get it, I understand it, I'm confident in it. Enough people around me who care about me and vice versa get it too. And the rest of the people, they'll either figure it out or they won't. And it's not really my job to do that for them. And also, I don't need to ruin my life trying to do that for them.
I think like what I've learned over years, and especially picking up Bitcoin, because when I got Bitcoin and it did the jump that it did after the halving, I felt a little bit less scared. Like I felt like, if I lose my job, then I can survive. I'm I'm not buying a Lambo, but I'm not going to starve either. I can always sell a bit of Bitcoin and feed my family. So I'm not tied to this job. I don't have that fear associated. As the fear disappeared and I didn't worry about losing my job, I became more powerful in my job. Like people valued my opinion more because I wasn't coming from a place of fear. I wasn't desperate. Like I didn't have this desperation. And all I see with people trying to get you to do something, this is desperation. It's so unflattering. Like it's just repulsive. Why are you so invested in me doing something? Like just look after your own shit. Like it's the same in the dating scene, same in sales, same in like so why not apply that to Bitcoin? Like Bitcoin's great. Like when you want to talk about it, I'm here for you. You'll get it eventually. When you want to talk about it, I'm here, and I'll talk you through it, because there's a lot of crap out there and a lot of scams and a lot of noise. When you want the real answers, you come to me and we'll sort you out. I find that approach so much more aligned with my own mentality, and I think it has in the long term a greater impact. I guess Wiz had this saying, I think you might have got it from Gigi, is shill lightly. Like, if you're going to shill lightly. Add a little sprinkle here, and don't underestimate the ripples that you send out through the universe. Like these little interactions you have, this podcast right now, that's one of the reasons why I'm on this, because I'm not an influencer. I don't want to be. But if you can impact someone who's going through a similar kind of experience, and they can see something in there that gets them to go down the rabbit hole and see things a little bit more differently, great. You've helped that person, and whether they attribute to that decision or not doesn't really matter. They're now part of the network, and we're all benefiting from them being there and providing value to society. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. It was something I was told really early on in corporate career, actually, is like, it would be it's amazing the amount of things that could get done if no one cared who got the credit for it.
Oh my God. I found that in a drawer. I found that it was a cookie, fortune cookie. And it struck, like, at the time I was just in a really shitty space, and I got this new desk, and I had a drawer, and I opened the drawer up, and there's this fortune cookie that said, yeah, you'd be amazed at the things you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. And I was like, wow, dude, that's really profound.
Yeah, definitely.
I put it back in the drawer in the hopes that someone else would pick it up, but that stuck with me 10 years. I can't remember who said it originally. I looked up the quote one day. It's someone famous. Yeah,
it's the epitome of an open network as well. That there will come a time where people don't remember. Well, people might even not remember the name of Satoshi in 1,000 years' time. Like, I feel like that's probably always going to be there. But a lot of the developers that have then built on the back of what Satoshi did, a lot of those names are probably going to be a bit of a mystery. But it doesn't mean that it hasn't had a profound impact.
I think that's probably the biggest threat to Bitcoin. And I've like most Bitcoiners, racked my brain trying to think about what the biggest threat and where the threats are. And I've gone through different threats, and some I thought were actual threats, weren't really threats. The one, I can't remember who said it. The one that really stuck with me was the indifference, the threat of indifference. And it's really long-term thinking, like 80 years from now, no one remembers why 21 million was a significant number. No one remembers why the block size is this size. Why do we do things a certain way? And it's that indifference, that the forgotten principles of Bitcoin, it just works, and no one questions why it works or how it works. And it's that whole, no one's doing this anymore, and that forgotten knowledge. So how do we, as a community, figure out what the things are and bring to a Bible of sense without religious connotations that can then live throughout history, the 10 commandments of Bitcoin or whatever. I've kind of tried to do that, and it's really bloody hard. But I think that's the greatest threat to Bitcoin is that in time we become indifferent to why we started down this journey and why it became important to us, and then it gets lost through the generations. Because I do believe Bitcoin will be around for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. I'd rather it didn't get superseded by something because it broke. I'd rather it just
likewise. Yeah, and I think you're right. It's complacency, or that indifference that can sometimes be the thing that's a big shift, isn't it? From an expert then becoming someone who's negligent because they haven't kind of kept up with the information, or a culture, kind of forgetting what brought them to the point of like being the pinnacle of that culture as well. It starts to become just lost in translation. I think it's good that Satoshi has baked in so many, I don't know what you call them, like little hints or Easter eggs to like the original reason behind Bitcoin, like, Chancellor on brink of second bank bailout. And the whole 2016 blocks for a difficulty adjustment is the opposite of 6102. His chosen birth date and year is all about the 6102 order as well. Like, all those things to me are just his way probably of seeing the fact that things might become indifferent or complacent over time, and really baking it into the protocol. So if you look a little bit deeper into Bitcoin, you start to then get back to the point of like, why is this here in the first place? What problem are we actually fixing?
Yeah, I don't know how we stop that happening. I think, as you said, there's enough Easter eggs and enough fail safes within Bitcoin. If someone does decide to change the 21 million cap, that we can always fall back to the original chain, the longest blockchain that still had that 21 million cap, and start again from there. I'm just blown away by how resilient the code is. Like, it's just phenomenal. Like, I remember when I was first looking at it, just blown away by the software and how clever it was. No, it's just so clever. It's beautiful.
Satoshi, he, they, whatever, has been so prescient in kind of triangulating what the attacks would be decades before they would happen, essentially. And I think the toxic maximalist nature of a lot of Bitcoiners is that immune system that anytime someone brings up the idea of a shitcoin or a pre-mine or a change to the code to proof of stake or to, you know, more coins or whatever it might be, I think that really like vicious response, even though some people say, oh, that put me off, I don't want to work in Bitcoin because people are too mean on the internet. So
yeah, because it's not new. We've seen it. Like all these threats. Yeah. You think you're brilliant because you discovered a threat to Bitcoin. You realized that was done and dusted back in 2017. Like, you know, looking at the block size wars, you just go, wow, I want to run a node. That's when I bought a node. Was that when I looked at the block size wars? Got to get a node because I've got to be able to verify, you know, that I'm running Bitcoin, that my UTXOs are actually Bitcoin UTXOs. You know, I've got to have a vote or a say in what Bitcoin is. It's all been done. Like, what's that, 12 years in now? And you know, if it hasn't been broken yet, what else is there? I don't know. That's where the humility has to come out. I wonder what happened with that. Like, surely it's happened before. And yeah, usually it has. There's something in the history of Bitcoin that just knocks it on the head. It's just not a threat.
I think the block size wars is such a great piece of Bitcoin history. And I'm not sure what other industries where something like that could have happened, where you have some of the biggest players that have the most financial backing saying, we're going to push this in a direction that's going to benefit us. And given that we're the ones with the most resources and we've got this heavy alignment with each other, this is definitely going to happen. And then you have users stand up to say like, no, I won't run that code. I'll just keep running this other one. You guys can mine on whatever fucking blockchain you want. It doesn't really matter. You can have Bitcoin 2 or SegWit 2x or whatever you want. Like, it doesn't really matter. And they eventually folded and went, okay, well, we don't want our own Bitcoin. We want the Bitcoin that everyone else is using. So we will just go with SegWit and leave it at that. That to me is incredible. That's very profound. I don't know many other examples of that happening in the world.
What did they do? They didn't fight that on. They did. Some of the plebs did. And I don't necessarily agree with fighting everything that's a threat. I don't think there's anything a threat to Bitcoin that needs to be fought. I think that framework I was talking about, like, how would Bitcoin respond? Just ignore them. It would just go around them. Like, just keep going. See you later. You know, that's nice. Do your bigger blocks over there. And you're going to give me some free tokens? Oh, sweet. I'll sell those and buy Bitcoin. You know, like,
that's right.
That approach, like, yeah, do your own shit. Like, you're a human. You're allowed to exercise your right to be human. And I'm just going to keep doing my human thing over here. And, you know, maybe we can chat later on or not. Like,
it's the very kind of anarchist, voluntarist approach to things, isn't it? It's saying you don't need to fight it. And in fact, by fighting it, you give it some level of credibility to say that it needs to be fought. Whereas if you're confident in the position and you're comfortable with where things are, just keep doing what you're doing. You know, let them fail on their own, and then they'll kind of rejoin the fold, perhaps with a bit of learnings.
I think many Bitcoiners haven't learned that lesson. And I say that with humility because it took me a while to learn it. My default reaction to something I didn't like was to attack it, you know. And I think having a little bit of humility and going, well, if it works, maybe we can benefit from it. If it doesn't really affect me. Like, yeah, it's an important lesson.
I have this strategy that I've been using for the last few years, and it's been going really well, and I'm getting better and better at it because my natural response often is to explain to someone why they might be wrong. Or if it's something that I think is outrageous and an attack, I'll go on the attack as well. Now, because most of the time that happens to be on things like Bitcoin Twitter, what I do is I write the message and then I highlight the message, delete it, and I never actually send it. I'm like, all right, that feels good. I've got that out. I don't need to convince that person. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people in the comments that will anyway. And I'm sure if this is a good idea, again, let them do it. And then we can kind of absorb it. Or if it's a bad idea, they'll learn it themselves. There's no point me wasting my energy on it. But sometimes it still feels good to be like, what is my thought here? How would I explain this if I was going to? I'll use this as like a learning opportunity to like put my thoughts down in a nice distilled manner and then be like, fuck that. I'm not going to actually enter that debate. I'll delete that and I'll just leave it. Every once in a while, I think one of those things slips out from the filter. But generally speaking, that's been my strategy of not going on the attack. I kind of do, but then I delete it before I actually hit the send button and properly go on the attack.
After you've written the response 3 times, then you think maybe there's something to this. Maybe I should respond to this, but I'm just going to leave it a little while to think about what's the best way to respond. Because I don't know. One of my core beliefs is that all humans are good. They don't inherently have an evilness that needs to be fought and destroyed. I think all humans come from a place of thinking they're doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing. They just get confused or whatever on the way. And if you have that belief, yeah, it sort of helps stop those attacks that they never provide any value to you. They always come at a cost. Yeah.
I think everyone sees themselves as the hero in their own story to some degree.
Yeah.
You know, they don't think they're doing the bad thing or that they're the bad guy. They're always doing it for a greater good or for a reason that makes complete sense to them. And that can make it easier to be a bit more humble or to try to take someone else's perspective or to let people just do their own thing, knowing that they're not doing it out of malice. And often it's coming from broken incentives, you know, that the system pushes them to make certain decisions because certain outcomes are more beneficial for them. And of course, if there's a culture built around that to say like those are the good outcomes to get, why wouldn't that person keep barreling ahead with that? It just doesn't make sense for them to not.
And they're going in the wrong direction. And at some point, all the pointers will be telling them that they're going in the wrong direction. They'll come to you with this horrible problem. You go, well, do you know why that's happening? You got to stop doing that. You got to go this way. It's a lot easier to show someone the solution when they figured out the problem, or they figured out that there is a problem and you can talk through the problem with them. When they think everything's rosy, you go, yeah, your shitcoin's doing well, great. Make sure you put a little aside and put it into Bitcoin because, they have a habit of tanking at the moment you don't expect. Or, and they think they know better and you go, okay, I'll just sit here in my Bitcoin and not pay any attention to it because I know at some point I'll see a chart on Twitter and I'll have a chuckle and shake my head and keep on scrolling.
Yeah, I think in the fullness of the time, it kind of all comes out in the wash, doesn't it? A lie normally always gets, understood. A mistake always ends up having a negative repercussion. Someone who's fixated on price ends up learning that fundamentals are a really important thing too.
Yeah.
What do you think there's a lot of things to be bullish about with Bitcoin. And I think sometimes the simplicity of just being able to save and then live life, that's probably the thing that I'm even most bullish on with Bitcoin. But is there anything that you feel like we haven't talked about that you reckon is a useful thing to throw in there about, what you're bullish about with Bitcoin?
It's everything you see, it points to Bitcoin, and it's becoming more and more like that. The inflation that we told everyone was coming is now here, and it's only going to get more and more impactful in people's lives. The cost of things is going to go up. You've got interest rates about to explode and potentially bring down the everything bubble. There's so many reasons to care about Bitcoin right now. You've got so many reasons to look down the rabbit hole. I think the stuff that Jack Ma has announced at the Miami conference is probably the King's Gambit. It's a fairly large forcing move on the government in terms of regulation, getting that regulatory clarity, because suddenly you've got Bitcoiners who want to start selling their sats and merchants that can accept the Bitcoin without having to deal with the Bitcoin. It starts opening that, and how Uber was established. They just did it, and then it became so embedded in the culture and society that they couldn't get rid of it. It's a clever, sneaky, sly roundabout way of having Bitcoin normalized, and that whole normalization, like it's no longer about the dark net and buying drugs online, and that whole sinister side of Bitcoin sort of disappeared. It's gone quiet. It's becoming really normal now. I think that's how it will unfold, is that normalization. And whether Jack Ma gets this thing off the ground or not, it doesn't really matter. It's this ongoing drive towards normalizing Bitcoin. Bitcoin's, no one says what's Bitcoin. It's now about how much Bitcoin you have, or when did you get in, or some other thing. Have you heard about this shitcoin? I think it's becoming more and more inevitable. In my mind, it's already inevitable, but I think other people are realizing this thing's not going away. If it's not going away, it's probably going to go up. Why haven't I got anything in it? Like, I kind of need to sort my stuff out. And that's adoption.
All of these things are like parallel Trojan horses to some extent, aren't they? Like Jack Mallers, what Strike's doing is not legal tender, but it kind of forces the hand of the government and regulators to eventually treat it as legal tender, or at least for citizens to see it as legal tender, even if it's not actually legal tender yet. Same as normies saying, okay, maybe I should have just a little bit of this. So you get a 1%. 1% very quickly becomes 5%, and then it's 10%. And then you start to learn, like, I don't even know anything about the stocks that are in my superannuation. Why don't I actually turn most of that into Bitcoin? Because I actually do understand that a bit more now. Like, it just is this creep in a very good way. And yeah, I think it's inevitable too, but I think everyone else is catching on to the inevitability of it, because all Bitcoin needs to do is not die and keep producing another block every roughly 10 minutes. And exactly what's been playing out the last 13 years will continue playing out. And even though it's sort of what's happening now in the world is the thesis of Bitcoin, what everyone has been expecting to happen, it's still somewhat surprising to see it all happening and happening so quickly. But it doesn't go backwards from here. Like, what's going on in the world in terms of
forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And governments overreaching and people kind of leaving the idea of statism and understanding money a bit better and wanting to kind of preserve their wealth a bit better. That's a one-way street. You don't find sound money then go like, oh, you know what? I wouldn't mind some of that fiat again. I'm going to go back to that and get rid of all my Bitcoin and go back to the other fold. It's a one-way street, and I just see it keep building and building.
Yeah, when I've got someone I care about, and I finally convince them that they should care about Bitcoin, I get them to sign up to an exchange, and they lock that first $500 worth at a couple of million sats. It's like a relief. It's like, okay, it's only a few million sats. You go, okay, 4 years later, a few million sats. Wow, you're kind of rich. Like, they're safe. They're, as long as they don't sell them, as long as I can get them onto a cold wallet, a cold storage wallet, I don't have to worry about them not being exposed to Bitcoin. And that's kind of cool. And you think about how many times that's happening throughout the world. It's only increasing, as you say. The demand's only increasing. The supply's only shrinking. Like, where do they hit? Somewhere up and to the right.
That's it. I think although there's a bit of a conflict of not wanting to orange pill everyone, there is still obviously satisfaction when you do orange pill someone and they own a bit of it. I've got a bit of a dark thought here, but I've had this basically when the world gets to a point of social unrest and a lot of people can't pay their bills or can't eat, I feel like there is going to be like a torches and pitchforks kind of moment. And the more people in your life that own a bit of Bitcoin, you at least know that those people won't be coming for you or coming for Bitcoiners. And I think that the more people we can get on board to understand what's going on, the more protected, not just we, but I mean, most people will be when it comes to that point. Like, I guess I'll give the extreme example of what I've thought in the past. It's like if none of my friends or family are into Bitcoin and only I've been into Bitcoin, and I've been that way for like a decade or more, until this point of like there's some sort of societal collapse or just really, even if it's temporary social unrest where people are like, I can't eat, so I need to break into someone's house to get some food. I don't want to be the person that people think about where it's like, he's been investing in Bitcoin for the last decade. Maybe we should pay him a visit. Maybe not even from like a violent or an aggressive standpoint, but just as a, hey man, come on, like you've been investing in this for a while, just give me a little bit. And I don't want that situation to play out, but I can see like things get pretty dicey in society when there are either hyperinflationary events or debt collapse type events. And I feel like those are that's the fork in the road that we're at. We're just going down one of them at some point. And yeah, I'm not looking forward to the social unrest bit, but I feel like some protection there is that the more people that own at least a little bit of Bitcoin are going to look upon you favorably and also be a bit more protected in themselves to not need to then break into someone's house to get some food or steal someone's Bitcoin or whatever it might be. But maybe that's me just being a bit paranoid. Who knows? No,
it's something I've thought about. And yeah, I think if they're not starving, that they're not as likely to come at you with pitchforks.
True.
But, and they're probably coming for your freezer rather than your cold wallet. Like they're turning up because they've got a dire need that needs to be satisfied. They're hungry. And they're starving, and they're now pushed to the point where they're prepared to be jailed or, imprisoned for feeding themselves. Like, they're desperate people, and that's when you open the door and feed them a meal. Like, you don't have to worry about your savings because they're protected in whatever setup you've gone to. So you can open your door and you can share a meal with them, and maybe they won't kill you.
It seems like a good trade-off.
Yeah, I always stack some meat in the freezer for someone else. I don't know who it is, but there'll be someone that turns up. And I don't live a flashy lifestyle. I live in a shitty house, and it's under assuming I don't drive a nice car and I look like a pauper, and I like that. I'm not going to be the first house they turn up to because I'm likely to be the guy with the shotgun. Like, it's not, I don't want to make myself a victim, but at the same time, I don't want to turn people away. If there's a hungry person shows up my door, I'll feed them and send them on their way and help them out if I can. But yeah, you don't want to be the Bitcoin guy as a target.
In a sea of non-Bitcoiners, absolutely. Although again, the flipping it back to a bit more hopeful or optimism, I think, again, the inevitability is starting to dawn on other people too. So I think we will get to a world in 10 years' time where most people own Bitcoin or use Bitcoin. Most will realize they do. Some won't even realize that's what they hold in their superannuation or that's what they're using when they're doing a transaction, but it'll just be there embedded.
Yeah, I think 10 years, sure.
I've got a tangent Bitcoin topic to talk to you about. So am I right that do you homeschool your kids? And would you be willing to talk just a bit about that?
Yeah, I've, as I said, gone down several rabbit holes. One of them was the public school system or school system. So my kids had never been in school. I started going down rabbit holes, I think, 2009. And yeah, one of those was we had to put our kids in school and we had to make the decision. And as a parent, you've had to make the decision, It started as which school should we send our kids to? And we went down the Montessori and the Steiner route, and we still found things we didn't like about them. And my wife picked up a John Taylor Gatto book. I think it was Weapons of Mass Instruction, and another one. And I read it, and it was very logical, very unemotional. But there were so many things I could look back on my own schooling and how I learned as a school child, and I learned primarily despite school, not because of it. I had some good teachers and some good experiences, and I had some good opportunities. But I think overall, I would have been better off just with a wise person or working in a business. Like, the amount of practical experience I've picked up on all sorts of strange jobs over the years. It's been far more than anything I learned at university or a school. So yeah, my son's now finished year 10. He's left the school system. Queensland is a little different to the other states. It's much easier to homeschool in Queensland. New South Wales is, I think, the hardest. Victoria and South Australia are slightly easier. But I'm quite, I guess, now that my kids are getting to the latter stages of their education, I'm quite happy with it. One of the biggest things in my mind was I'm making a decision on behalf of my child with all the wisdom I've accumulated at the ripe age of 29 or probably 32. But I didn't know as much as I know now, but I know more than a 5-year-old. It's not a decision I can give to them to make. So I'm making a decision on their behalf. Geez, I hope it's the right one. And you'll never truly know whether it was the right one, but I don't have any regrets. My children aren't academic geniuses, but neither am I. I got through school with my logic and my ability to remember things that made sense to me. The things that didn't make sense to me, I wasn't able to recall as well. English, I wasn't super brilliant at, but I picked up some skills in that later on in life. It was what I brought, it was the things that made sense to me, piqued my interest. I'm in a learning career, or I make my money in learning, so I know an awful lot about learning and how humans learn, more adult side. But when I look at my children, they're well-rounded young adults. They don't have any fear. They've never been bullied. They've never really been tested, which is kind of a a blind spot or something they're going to have to develop later on in life, but they don't go into interactions fearing what the other person's going to say or do. They can talk to adults like they're on the same level as them. My daughter has this peculiar trait of when she doesn't respect someone, she doesn't listen to them. So she literally can't recall what they said, or, you know, if they pissed her off, or, you know, they both work, so they're both, you know, putting in effort and getting paid, and seeing that, you know, drop in value over time. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me and for them. Yeah, what are you thinking of doing with your kids?
I actually don't have kids at the moment, and one of the reasons for a long time I didn't want kids. I guess I grew up thinking that I would have kids because that's just the natural thing that you do, and that's what your parents tell you. It'll be great when you have kids someday, etc. And then when I got to sort of late teenage years, I started thinking like, maybe I don't want kids. Like I want to be able to really focus on what I want to do. And I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I want to have the time to do that without having too many other, well, for lack of better terms, like really significant distractions that are not just distractions, but are things that would absolutely take my focus. And so I focused on career, I focused on learning. And as I got further into that, that really solidified my view of like, no, I'm pretty sure I don't want kids. And part of it wasn't just the finance, it was all the social stuff that comes around it, where I thought if I have a kid, I'm going to have to integrate with all the normal shit that other people do. And it's not the life I want. I'm going to feel very disingenuous about myself, where I'm going to have to show up to like school basically, and have all the shitty conversations that I don't want to have. And you know, the government's going to have some level of control over this thing that they believe is partly theirs, even though I think like this is my child. This is, you know, I should have the ultimate decision. I should be able to do what I think is best. So that was part of it. It was like, it started, I guess, with finance and interest, and like, I want to be able to focus on what I want. And then eventually, especially since getting into Bitcoin more, and there is definitely a very pro-family culture in Bitcoin, it's made me really question that and go like, actually, I think I do want kids. But then there's still those barriers. And I think the last barrier was things like education. And as I've started to go down the rabbit hole of home education, and like my partner has as well, we've both gone like, I think, well, this is doable, basically. Like we have the financial situation now. It would be better to maybe stretch it out in a couple of years to be really sort of solid in that regard. You know, we're both doing things that I know it's difficult because the longer you stretch it out, the more difficult it becomes.
Don't wait. Like that's the mistake. And you'll realize when you've had your first kid, how much it's physically taxing, like the lack of sleep and the running around and playing games and stuff like that. You go, geez, I'm glad I didn't leave it later. You're never going to be at that stage where you're ready. Like you never will. And if you are, then you'll find that you won't be able to have kids because you've left it too long for whatever reason. Do it, man. I know you need to. I know it. It's expensive. Like the homeschool for me meant I was the sole income earner for the last decade. That was hard, stressful. But then as you get older, your income increases and things get a little bit easier and the kids don't cost as much. And we got through it. But neither of my kids are planned. They were both accidental blessings. Don't regret anything on their side. The only thing I regret with them was not feeding them meat from the start. Like we introduced mushy vegetables and horrible stuff, and they always had a little bit of meat, but it was incidental. It wasn't the focus. And they're healthy kids. Like I think that's more luck than anything.
No, yeah. I don't know about that. I think there's some level of random variance, but then of course it's the structure that you provide around them, and it's just generally what you provide in terms of your own values too.
I think humans are pretty resilient creatures. I think it takes a lot to suppress that learning desire, or that natural vibrancy that comes with a human. You know, we've developed these structures that do a really good job of it, like these corporations that school our kids, and these guidelines that shove toxins down our kids' throats and inhibit their natural vigor. But through all that, there's still billions of us, you know, and we're still reproducing and maybe not thriving, but we're still surviving. Yeah, I think humans thriving is a really good outcome to be seeking as the collective.
Absolutely. And I think as kind of more decentralized ways of raising kids, like homeschooling just being a perfect example of that, as that becomes more accepted, more available to people, I think it gives people that capacity again. I know it's made me now start really reconsidering those decisions.
So one of the biggest fears we had was that our kids would be the weird homeschool kids, you know. Come 2020, I don't think there's a single Australian that wasn't homeschooled for a period of time.
That's right.
It was like, we look like bloody geniuses now. It's like, you know, you must be struggling with the homeschool. I've been doing this for years, you know. One of the hardest things was to not replicate the school experience at home. And that's what people struggled with. They tried to replicate this horrible experience in an institution in the home environment. And you go, if you cut out the lining up, the sitting down, the putting your hands on the head, the be quiet, the disruption and the lunch breaks and the traveling to different classrooms and doing different things, like the amount of wasted time in a school day, you got like half an hour worth of real learning, you know, a day, if you're lucky, like a half an hour of proper learning. You sit your kids down, or you take them on an experience and get them to get some learning value out, you're suddenly ahead. Like, and you might be doing things that are 2 or 3 years in advance, and then you might have to go back and do some English or do some, you know, grammar or whatever it is. You're tying it back to real life experiences, and it just embeds in the kid's mind and sticks with them. And they have this, they start building their own mental framework of the world, and it's a lot more resilient than this confused thing they develop in school. And the confidence, like, how much is confidence worth in a human? Like, yeah, to not have those issues I had growing up with school is kind of priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And my understanding, at least, of what most researchers said is what the benefit of especially primary school and high school is learning some basic skills. So reading and writing, a bit about maths, a bit about history, some socialization and experience of the world. And really, those are the two main parts. And of course, in there is some critical thinking, some logical reasoning, you know, being able to look at things from a first principles basis. So like, not like what to think, but more like how to think. It's like those three main things: basic skills, how to think, and socialization / experience in the world. Knowing that you can get that far greater in a more efficient manner at home with people like parents that have the best interests of their children at heart, compared to, you know, a teacher who's overworked in a system that is understaffed, under-resourced, that might not have the correct incentives in the first place, you know, within a larger system of government and regulation that is so detached from reality for the most part, and definitely has broken incentives. Like, you can definitely get those sort of three core things that children need at home far greater than you can, you know, at a public school or a private school, really, a system.
As an incidental benefit, you also get to retain your family structure or build a family structure, you know, and those kids will look after you when you're old and decrepit. You know, you can't wipe your own bum. They might hang around and help you out. Like, the whole destruction of the family unit, you know, of doubting what the wisdom your parents said. You know, I've never gained a whole heap of wisdom from my parents, but they never had to sit down and think about what they needed to impart onto me as a small human. Whereas, you know, we got challenged. We didn't feel like we knew what to teach them. We didn't know what wisdom to give them. And you got it internally, but you have to think about it. You know, if you palm that off to someone else, you've just trusted them to develop your own child. Like, as a Bitcoiner, it just seems mad. Yeah.
It was the conflict that made me put off having kids at so many points, where I thought, well, if I were to have them now, I would need to, because I scaled down to part-time work relatively early in my career, so I could just focus on like leveraging my time to build my own, you know, education in other areas like Bitcoin, for example. So I thought to myself, I will need to immediately go back to 5 days a week work, just so that they can be at school with someone else, and I would spend less time doing the things that I want, and I wouldn't actually spend a whole lot of time with these children that I would have. Like, that doesn't make sense. That I can't compute that. I can only do this in a scenario where I get to spend the majority of my time with them, or I get to be the integral part of their education as well. And so, yeah, I feel like that's sort of getting to that point, or I'm at that point maybe even now, and also hearing that there's just more decentralized, more genuine ways of doing things like education is reassuring. It's nice.
Yeah, they're good, mate. They're really good. I wish I had more. I'm done though.
Any final thoughts or any other topics that you thought we're going to talk about that we didn't get around to? You know, Bitcoin, or, you know, tangential, personally, whatever it might be.
I kind of wanted to go into the citadels a little bit, and I know I presented on it at the Bush Bash, even though I didn't really know what I was going to be presenting on in terms of Citadel. I put my hand up like so many times throughout my life, particularly as it got to now and Bitcoin, and there's just been too many synergistic moments. Like I find myself saying something and not know where it comes from, but having this compulsion to say it. And the Citadel, like putting my hand up to this, I didn't know anything about Citadels when I put my hand up. Wiz contacted me and said, "Do you want to present?" I went, "Yeah." He said, "I don't know what I'm going to present on." And then within about half an hour, I said, "Is anyone doing anything on Citadels? I'd like to talk about Citadels." And I think something within me knew I wanted to have a Citadel, even though I didn't really understand why or how or what. And the way I presented the topic was it's really about getting an elevated sense of privacy and security in your life. You know, having a little bit more freedom to be able to do the things you want to do, to associate with the people you want to associate with, and that need to have that little bit of more freedom and control over my life, I think, has been running throughout my life for many years. But in the last two, it's been a need that's not being satisfied. And I just wanted to reframe the Citadel thing, because it's to me, the word kind of conjures up all these horrible, you know, not horrible, but cultish kind of metaphors in my mind. I just don't think it's like that. I think there's many different types of Citadels. I think at the moment I'm looking at having for my family a little bit more freedom and resilience, you know, with the farm. And I want to share that with Bitcoiners. So my vision around Citadels and where that's headed is really around primarily securing my family's, my food and security for my family. Secondly, having a clubhouse. Like, I think it'd be the coolest thing to have a meeting place on the farm that people can come to and associate and chat to. My dream is having a bush bash there, but I don't know if I'll ever get a double to have that sort of thing. And then living with Bitcoiners, not on them or next to them, but around them, and providing a place for them to permanently or semi-permanently stay would be my ideal goal. Like, and how that works, I just don't know at the moment. But I think what I wanted to cover was, don't pigeonhole Citadel. Don't think it's got to be this way, that way, or it's got to look like this or sound like this. It's going to be different depending on what your vision is. And if people don't like it, they won't join your Citadel. They won't participate in it. They won't interact with it. If it is something they will, they do like, they'll join in and they'll contribute.
I think that's a good point, though. It's that it doesn't need to be probably what a lot of people see in terms of pictures of Citadels on Bitcoin Twitter, where it's this well fortified castle with, you know, built up walls and, you know, electrical barbed wire on the top of it and turret machine guns and whatever else. Actually, I don't think I've seen anything that looks quite like that, but that's an extreme version of what most people put out there in terms of what's his.
Little, it looked like a mobile base station that had all these microwave dishes.
Actually, yeah. So Pleb Music just did the thing. I've got to look at that because I saw it. I didn't actually turn the sound on. It was one of those things as I was scrolling through my feed, I saw a few things. But you're right, actually. Now that reminds me, I'll have to go look just to see. But I see it as similar to you. Like, it's a bit more flexible. And like, I would love to have a community of Bitcoiners that, again, we live in a general area. Like, we're not all on the same property perhaps, but we're close enough where we can have some interactions in terms of a market between us, you know, sharing resources, sharing just our labor, but also then being able to bond and have a clubhouse and catch up and make decisions as a community. Like, to me, that's the best kind of Citadel. It doesn't need to be behind, you know, walls, essentially. Right. And in fact, yeah. And I'd say in a lot of ways, it's probably better to not be behind walls, because I remember something from your Citadel talk was that, like, it just puts a target on your back. And those walls are really not going to stop the kind of people that you don't want to come in there. In fact, it's probably going to incentivize them and draw a red flag for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. That was what I wanted to achieve. Just to have people rethink, you know, their potential strategies and how they approach the Citadel. Yeah, I don't think we'll have to be farmers either. Like, that division of labor, like it's really about securing your food source, you know. And if if someone's willing to sell their cows for Bitcoin, then we're okay. You know,
True.
I don't know if they'll be willing to sell beef for dollars in the future, but definitely for Bitcoin, I'm sure they will. And there's different citadels for different purposes. You know, as you said, the market and free trade, like being able to sell your products and services to an open market, and not worry about someone overhearing or robbing you as you bring your goods to the market. You know, all these different problems can be solved with this citadel thinking. You know, they don't all have to be in the country with walls. They can be in the city with, you know, in suburbia if you want. You know, it's really about achieving your elevated security, elevated privacy, a realm within a realm, as it were. Yeah, good
That
chat,
makes sense. Absolutely. And thank you so much for coming on. It's good to touch base again after the Bush Bash. And I knew that there would be many, many topics that would just be able to riff off. Bitcoin's like that, I think, especially when you find true Bitcoiners. So I appreciate the time, and I'm sure we'll do it again sometime as well.
No worries, man. It's been a really good chat.
So how can people follow you? Is it BTC_Brisket, or is it something else? Actually, ignore that. What you just tell the social, because otherwise I'll get it wrong.
BTCBrisket. It is cool. Twitter, yeah.
No, that's really good.
No website.
Well,
no website,
again.
no Instagram or anything. Yeah.
Does that? I mean, because you've got a lot of things, a lot of experience, a lot of topics that people could kind of build from in terms of just resources. Have you ever considered having something like even if it's not a website, like a GitHub, where you have some of the things that you've learned over time? Like, has that ever been a thought, or is it just like it's just not there because it hasn't been the focus?
Yes and no. Like, well, I spoke to Daz B. I can't remember how to pronounce his name.
I know.
We had a good chat, and he got me into this program called Obsidian, which is like mind mapping. So I've wanted to write this stuff out in detail, but I find I don't know where. And I need to organize my thoughts, and then I'm concerned that someone's going to pick up my thoughts on a pad of paper, because I love pads of paper, and misinterpret some of the just thoughts, random thoughts that pop in my head, as being weird or conspiratorial, or this guy's suicidal or whatever. You know, when you take a thought out of context, it seems kind of strange. So
True.
I've been kind of jotting some of my thoughts and logically arranging them using this Obsidian app, which is just phenomenally cool, and then encrypting that. And before our chat today, I tried to get access to some of that stuff, but I locked it behind a wall of encryption, and I can't unlock it.
Extra secure.
I don't know. At the moment, I'm just jotting some of this stuff and these thinking down, because I have accumulated a lot of knowledge. I know I have, and part of my struggle is trying to articulate that and convey some of the value in my little experiments to someone else. So not at the moment, but maybe one day, who knows?
That's it. I think you put it yourself in the Citadels talk, where you said, like, there's a lot of leaders that are going to pop up in the Bitcoin space, and it's often going to be people that don't want to be the leaders, but they just find themselves in that position because they have learnt a lot. They've distilled it enough to be able to educate others about it, and then naturally, you become a leader/educator. You become something that people can use as a way to set that North Star or that compass. So I think you've got a lot of diverse experiences in life, and you've kind of distilled it to some really good first principles. It makes sense that that's probably just going to proliferate out, probably whether you like it or not, in fact, because some of that just comes through conversation and then people repeat it. So sometimes it's good to have a website where you can distill it yourself and say, well, this is my message, regardless of how everyone else interprets me. This is what I want to put out there.
Beautiful. I'm kind of a bit chuffed that you remembered that part, because I don't know where that came from. I didn't have it planned as being a talking point, but it was something I felt fearful of for a long time, that I may become a leader, because I don't like leading people. I don't like the responsibility that comes with leading people. I've never wanted it. I've never sought it, but I find myself in these situations where I am the leader, I don't know, by default or something. And I think many people in that room show some of those qualities that you would expect in a leader. And I'm not going to dox them or anything like that, but there's certain qualities among Bitcoiners that I think will make them the leaders they need to be to take humanity into the next stage. And they may be leading people that aren't Bitcoiners.
True. Yeah, I think that kind of going back to that Jeff Booth quote about having firm opinions but held lightly, I reckon Bitcoiners are very good at that, being able to have the confidence to try, but if it doesn't work, to say, well, why didn't that work? And let's not, beat ourselves up over it. Let's figure out how to move forward, because we're going to need that over time. But you're right. I think I'm most bullish on Bitcoiners, just all the people that I've met at the Bash, all the people that I've, integrated with online on Bitcoin Twitter. It just makes me very just reassured about not just Bitcoin, but like the whole world and humanity.
Yeah.
Which is,
hope is something we don't have a lot of at the moment. And you can tell when someone has hope, it permeates everything they do and say. It's just like, wow, I want to be around this person.
That's it. It's very uplifting.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for the talk.
No worries, man. I'll see you in Newburn, yeah.
Indeed, yeah. I reckon I'll be there. And look, for everyone listening, thanks for listening. If you've got any comments or anything, then please reach out either on mission_Bitcoin or hardblock BTC. And thanks for listening. Until next time.